It is 12 o'clock Central Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Welcome, everybody. My name is Rachel Edwards. I'm a registered dietitian with Archimedes Group, and we're going to be talking about fueling for exercise today. I love this topic. As an avid exerciser myself, I find it really, really helpful for just getting the most out of my workouts. And there's tons of diets and conflicting information on the internet. So super excited to hopefully share some useful tips with you guys today. So topics, we're going to start with hydration. We'll also discuss fueling, when we use carbs, protein, fats, when are those most useful for us, how much protein is actually most useful for you. That's a question I get a lot in my practice. We'll also discuss recovery and an argument for gut health today. So before exercising, starting a new program, it's always good to ask yourself these questions. If you have chest pain, recent pregnancy, type 2 diabetes, if you answer yes to any of these questions, it's a good idea to talk with your doctor before starting a new exercise program. And then after all of the more, immediate medical concerns, I think it's still really relevant to ask yourself a few more questions before starting, right? How is your sleep? We know getting less than 6 hours of sleep is much higher associated with injury risk and really just not getting the most out of your workouts, right? Not functioning as well during the day. Hydration and nutrition status. Are you fueling your body? Are you getting that water for that recovery, for that temperature regulation? Also super important. And then, are you sick? Sometimes our body just needs a recovery day or two. Make sure you skip the gym, rest, or do lighter activities if you're not feeling so hot. So hydration, I think when we think hydration, we think water and we think electrolytes. Usually salt and sugar comes to mind, right? But we actually use potassium, magnesium, calcium chloride, phosphate. These are also really essential electrolytes that just help keep the body hydrated, right? So we need hydration for thermoregulation, making sure we're regulating our temperature during and after exercise, to help with waste disposal. This may aid with, if you have a tendency to get really excessively sore, being adequately hydrated may help with that. And a question I get a lot is, are sports drinks going to be helpful for me, right? And it definitely depends. Usually sports drinks are most helpful for those who are either exercising for more than an hour in really, really hot temperatures, right? Really high intensity, really high frequency athletes. Otherwise, we often get the electrolytes that we need just from a healthy and balanced diet, right? And then you don't get the excess sugar that you may not actually be using in the sports drinks. So keep in mind, we get all the electrolytes we need typically from a balanced diet if you're more of a recreational exerciser versus an athlete. And the fun part, fueling for different activities. So this is where we're going to talk about what you're actually using when you're exercising, what fuels you're burning. So the first 1 to 3 seconds of exercise, we have a little bit of stored energy in our muscles that we use, right? We use it up really quickly, about 1 to 3 seconds. Immediately after that, we go into our phosphocreatine system. So this lasts 3 to 15 seconds. So mostly useful for like power lifters, Olympic lifters, those really heavy lifts that are really, really short in duration. This is what you're going to be using. And so you might see athletes like that, creatine supplements on the market using that kind of thing. That's really only useful if you're doing those really short bouts of powerful exercise. Because once we get past that 15 seconds, that's when we get into our anaerobic system. And all anaerobic really means is that we don't need oxygen to use this form of energy, right? Which means it's a lot quicker and a lot more available to us, because it doesn't have to take time to go through an oxidative process, right? So our anaerobic metabolism is what we use for about 15 seconds to 2 minutes of activity. And we are burning carbohydrates in this system We actually need oxygen in order to utilize fats, so we don't use fats during an anaerobic activity. And when we get to like ketosis in the keto diet, we'll talk a little bit about that and how that might be different. But generally speaking, we use carbohydrates for anaerobic activities, right? So anything lasting 15 seconds to 2 minutes. So this could be interval training, this could be general lifting activities, sprinting, those kinds of things. You're going to be using more of an anaerobic metabolism. So after about 2 minutes, that's when we go into our aerobic metabolism, which means we're using oxygen, right? Which makes sense because the longer duration that you're going for exercise, the more energy you're going to need. And while oxidative metabolism processes take more time to create that energy, they're also a lot more sustainable, right? So we can go for longer using this energy system. And so when we're looking at low intensity exercise, so you're going for longer than 2 minutes, maybe you're on the elliptical, maybe you're going a little bit slower, less than 45% of your heart rate max, fat is going to be your main energy source. So about 60% fat we're utilizing, the other 40% is going to be carbohydrates. Once your intensity gets higher, you're going to have more of a dependence on carbohydrates. And the main reason for that is carbohydrates are more readily available, right? So for more intense exercise where you need that energy fast, carbohydrates are what you're going to be using. So once you get to about 80% of your heart rate max, you know, if you're doing higher intensity exercise, you're going to be using mostly carbohydrates at that point. Still a little bit of fat, you know, there's always a little bit of crossover here, but mostly carbohydrates during the higher intensity, longer bouts of exercise. And so there is a point where this switches for marathon runners, other long distance, you know, people in competition. Once that duration is about 2 hours or more, we start to switch back to fat metabolism, mostly because we've just used up our carbohydrates at that point, right? We've used up the carbs in our bloodstream, and we also have a storage form of carbohydrates in our muscles called glycogen that we've also probably used at that point. So if you've ever talked to a marathon runner, maybe you've ran yourself and you hit that wall about 2 hours, this is a big reason for that, is we're switching back to fat metabolism. And often what that means is we have to slow down, right? We're not able to keep that same high intensity because the energy source needs more time for us to be able to use it to go through that process. All right, and I promise I'll take questions at the end, by the way. So why is fat metabolism? Why does it take so long? It has to go through a process called beta oxidation. So it's just an extra process carbs doesn't have to go through in order to be converted to energy that we can use, right? So our more fast twitch muscle fibers, right? Those that you're using during anaerobic activity or really high intensity activities, just can't utilize them. It's not available for them to use, right? And there's a little bit of a hormone response in the glycogen breakdown, the carbohydrate breakdown as well. So what does this mean for different diets, right? You'll notice that we didn't really talk about protein here. Reason for that is protein in its original form, we really don't use it for energy, right? It's more of a recovery nutrient. I think the literature I've seen, it's like 2% we can use directly for energy, and then everything else is fat and carbohydrates. So when someone's eating a low carb, high protein diet, maybe they feel really good during exercise. And this is because of a process called gluconeogenesis, which really just means we are converting protein into carbohydrates, right? So excess protein that you're eating, if you're not consuming a lot of carbohydrates, it's going to actually go into this process. You can see on the left side here, these are different amino acids. So those are our building blocks of protein, right? And you can see how they kind of go into this process and go around the circle to eventually become carbohydrates that we can then use for energy during exercise. We'll talk about how much protein is recommended for muscle building and all of that. But I do want to note, for those who are doing a more high protein diet, keep in mind you have to be drinking more water, Reason for that is protein has nitrogen on it, which carbohydrates, fats do not. And so when we're processing down protein, we cleave off that nitrogen and it gets excreted in our urine. So some people are urinating a little bit more often when they're on a really high protein diet. Perfectly safe for healthy individuals without any kidney problems. But you do want to be drinking some more water to make sure you're staying hydrated. So that's something to keep in mind here. How much protein is recommended? So for those who are doing higher bouts of activity, going above typical protein recommendations can have a benefit, right? So our typical recommendation is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein per day. So when you're doing higher bouts of activity, that number goes up to 1.2 to 2 grams. And I think where you fall in that range is very individualized, depends on the person, the activities that you're doing, maybe something to talk with a dietitian about, right? But this is going to be more of what you're looking at for higher bouts of activity, higher intensity exercise, maybe you have weight loss goals. This is going to be helpful for you. Again, water needs are going to increase a little bit with a higher protein diet, so make sure you're drinking lots of water. And a question I get a lot is a high protein diet harmful? It is not harmful for those with normal kidney function. Of course, if you do not have normal kidney function, talk with your doctor. The only way I think for healthy people, a high protein diet can be harmful is if you're limiting those other essential nutrients, right? Because your protein intake is so high, maybe you're not eating enough of other things that you need. And once we get above that 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, as we saw right here, gluconeogenesis, a lot of excess protein that you're consuming is actually being converted to carbohydrates in the body anyway. So you may just be consuming really expensive carbohydrates, right, that aren't quite as much fun on your gut health. So keep that in mind, that diet balance is still important. You still probably want some carbohydrates. Keto diets and exercise. So keto diet's super popular right now with weight loss in particular. It actually started as a diet for epilepsy in the early 1900s, fun fact. But a lot of people are using it and finding success with it, with weight loss. Whether that's sustainable weight loss is definitely more questionable. This is a very hard diet to sustain long term. But most of the literature tells us we need to be in about 70 to 80% of our calories coming from fat in order to be doing a true keto diet, in order to get into what's known as ketosis, which is where your body starts relying more on fats instead of carbohydrates for its main energy source, right? So as we saw kind of in our metabolism up here, fat is going to be a little bit harder to do those higher intensity exercises, right? When you're first starting a keto diet, it might feel really good when you still have the glycogen in your muscles. But if these break down, so often that's when we kind of hit that keto wall. If you've ever heard someone on this diet kind of hitting that point where their energy starts to drag, high intensity becomes a lot more difficult. Often that means you're in ketosis, and the high intensity exercise is going to be more difficult. There are reports of athletes trying keto diets, mixed reports of how successful that is, right? Definitely not a lot of studies on this topic, but it can take weeks to months for an adaptation to occur. And what they're trying to do is get their body to rely more on fats instead of carbohydrates for that main energy source in order to kind of make their metabolism more efficient. Again, whether that's useful or accurate, we really don't know. I would say most athletes do not do a ketogenic diet. All right, so how do we actually apply this to our meals, our snacks, what we're eating throughout the day, right? Having balanced meals is probably the most important thing when we're talking about getting the most out of your workouts, your exercise, and your recovery. So I usually tell my clients, eat a balanced meal 2 to 4 hours before the workout. And then you can still have a snack 30 to 60 minutes before, even if you have had a meal recently. But especially if it's been more than 4 hours since your last meal, you probably want a snack before your workout. something carb heavy for that more immediate pre-workout snack. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck, right? Because that is going to be what we're utilizing most easily for energy. And then there is some research post-exercise. A 3-to-1 carb to protein ratio can be optimal for preventing muscle breakdown, helping with muscle building, tissue repair, helping reduce that soreness that you might feel. It may even increase fat oxidation if you are trying to lose fat, and then helps with waste removal as well. So a lot of carbs to that protein ratio. Still make sure you're consuming fats, and then whole foods so that we're getting those electrolytes that we need. And I have some fun post-workout snacks if anyone's interested in kind of what that carb to protein ratio looks like. So this might be some Greek yogurt with granola and fruit, peanut butter and banana sandwich, chocolate milk. Those are weirdly perfect carb to protein ratios. Protein bars can be great if they have some carbohydrates in them. If not, you might have something along with that. Fruit shakes with protein powder, nuts and fruit, edamame and fruit, tuna, whole grain crackers, tons of different options for kind of getting that protein in those carbs after your workout. I think the most important thing is, again, those balanced meals, eating throughout the day. But there is a little bit of research that shows within 30 to 60 minutes, if you have that 3-to-1 carb to protein ratio, this might be most optimal for helping you recover from your workouts, helping with that fat loss and muscle gain as well. And recovery. So when we're exercising, we're breaking down the muscle, we're using our energy, right? Recovery is when we actually start to build muscle back up, right? Or maintain that muscle. So making sure you're adequately hydrated, stretching, massage therapy can be really, really helpful. Make sure you're getting at least 6 hours of sleep, 7 to 8 hours is recommended. For nutrition, 3 balanced meals per day is the typical recommendation, right? I'd say that's kind of the minimum depending on what you're trying to do. We only process somewhere between 30 and 40 grams of protein towards muscle maintenance or building at a time, right? So what that means is anything else you eat in one sitting as far as protein just goes to other processes in the body, right? Maybe gluconeogenesis, converting into carbohydrates, whatever else we use protein for. And so that's a good argument for kind of spreading your protein intake in particular throughout the day to kind of give you the most the best recovery for your muscles. When we're talking about muscle soreness, it has a bit to do with nutrition, right? It also depends on how intense your workout was, how frequently you exercise. Usually muscle soreness goes down as we exercise more frequently. But if you're someone who is sore for days on end, 3 days or more, typically that means you're not recovering well. And it's a good time to look at, am I being well fed? Am I, getting the nutrients I need to recover? Am I hydrated? Am I sleeping well? Did I kind of gradually increase my intensity, or did I jump back in all at once, right? Those are good questions to ask yourself to help just kind of reduce that soreness. We want to still walk the next day. All right. And then this is just my argument for fitness and gut health, because I think when we're looking at nutrition for fitness, we get very focused on how do I optimize my workout? How do I build muscle, lose fat, increase my ability to do this sport, whatever it is, right? And having a whole health approach is still important, and making sure you're taking care of the essential functions of your body, which I think is why sometimes when we go really low carb, it can be problematic because you might not be getting enough fiber. Fiber is our prebiotic, which means it fuels our gut health, right? Lots of research coming out about gut health, how it houses most of our immune system, how it's related to our energy production, our nutrient absorption, hormone function, disease prevention. Gut health is huge, right? And the main driver of a healthy gut is getting a variety of fibrous foods, right? So your fruits and your vegetables, your starchy grains, whole grains, nuts, legumes, all of those more plant-based foods are going to have fiber in them. So I've got a list of some high fiber foods here on the right. If you're concerned or interested in getting more of that in your diet. So we talked about balanced meals, both for, fueling and recovering from your workouts, as well as getting adequate electrolytes. So this is a great example of what that can look like. You do not need all 5 food groups in every meal, right? But it's wise to combine at least 2 or more of these in your meals and snacks. And reason for that is we get those carbs, that more immediate energy. Fats are going to be digested a little bit more slowly, so is our fiber and our protein. And so you get that nice balance of kind of more consistent energy throughout the day, fueling for your workouts, and then recovery nutrients as well. So our fruits, our vegetables, we get fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Supplements are fantastic, but we want to make sure we're still getting whole foods because it's estimated that there are nutrients that we do not even know. We do not even know what they do. So still important to get your whole foods. Get a variety of colors is a great way to think about it. Same with starchy vegetables, lentils, beans, grains. They get kind of put in that category mostly because they are a little more energy dense, right? Great pre-workout fuel, lots of fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Protein is essential for our tissue building, repair, building those muscles. It's also important for hormone regulation, enzymes, and other functions in the body. And then don't forget the fats for sure. We need those for tissue repair, regulating our inflammation response, and then we use those for energy during exercise as well. I really love this meme. If anybody can relate to those lazier days at the gym. And that references, if anyone wants to learn more about kind of the processes and how nutrition is used for exercise, ACSM and the International Sports Science Association are really great resources for that. Also, the Mayo Clinic is an easy Google. If you ever have exercise questions, they have a lot of good information as well. And with that, that is all I have for you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. This is a great time for questions. If you have any, feel free to unmute or throw them up in the chat. Ooh, this is a great question. How does caffeine factor into workouts? Yeah, so caffeine does have, what's the word? It has a exercise boosting effect, essentially, right? So it's not directly used for energy, but it kind of helps with that energy production process. So a little bit of caffeine can help you with, increasing the intensity of your workouts. When it comes to caffeine, just make sure you're not getting dehydrated, because if we drink, you can overdo anything, right? If we drink too much coffee, sometimes that's going to be causing us to go to the bathroom more often. The more caffeine we consume, the more water it takes to excrete it from the system once you're done using it. So that's why they say 4 cups of coffee is kind of the max you want to drink in a day, because anything more than that, you might start to see some dehydration. And if we get dehydrated, right, the blood volume might decrease. We're not getting that oxygen delivery. It's going to be harder to do higher intensity workouts, right? So there's a balance there. But yeah, having a little bit of coffee or some caffeine right before your workout can be very beneficial. What do I think about protein drinks? Protein drinks can be really great post-workout in particular. If you're, doing a really low carb diet, they might have that gluconeogenesis process, right, in order to be utilized for energy during your workout. But again, protein's expensive. If it were me and I were thinking about a balanced diet and what I want to fuel for exercise, I would choose carbohydrates because you get fiber for your gut health, right? It's typically a cheaper and a more easily utilized energy substrate for your workout. But yeah, protein powders can be great if you don't eat a lot of, high protein foods in particular, and you want to optimize your recovery after your workout. A protein shake is great. What supplements are good to help increase natural energy and fiber intake? Increase natural energy and fiber intake. I'm not entirely sure I understand that question, so feel free to clarify. But supplements that are good for natural energy. I guess I don't know what natural energy means. But I will say with supplements in the United States in particular, they're not regulated by the FDA. So there are certain stickers that are good to look for on the label of your supplements, like NSF and USP. If you see those stickers on the label, that means a third party went in and tested what's in your supplement is actually in it and the quantities that they say, no extra fillers or banned substances, which does occasionally happen, especially with sports supplements. So third-party tested supplements are always the best, sometimes a little more expensive, but definitely worth it to ensure you're actually getting what the label says. As far as what supplements are good to take, a third-party tested protein powder can be a great way to supplement a little extra protein in your diet if you don't eat enough. It's still important to eat whole food sources of protein because, like I said, we don't always get all of the essential amino acids that we want from just a protein powder by itself. And then there's nutrients that we don't even know. We know it's important for the body, but we don't know why. So whole foods are still important. Keep that in mind. But yeah, supplements can be a great way to boost your nutrition. Natural fiber intake. I think fiber supplementation really depends on the person. Some people do use that to help with weight loss because it's very satiating. It helps you feel full. Again, it's still important to get it from your diet because we have different kinds of fiber that do different things for us. And we want to make sure we're getting a balance there. So I would say talk with your dietitian about what supplementation regimen is right for you. A good pre-workout snack for someone who typically works out first thing in the morning. Oh, such a good question. Yeah, so often people say you want to fuel before exercise, right? You want to have something to kind of give you that immediate energy. But if you're a super early morning workout person, like 5 a.m., you don't necessarily need to shove a bunch of things down, right? Especially if you don't have time to digest it, it may do you more harm than good, right? Not harmful, like seriously harmful, but you might get like stomach cramps, you might be at a lower intensity in your workout, right? So if you're working out first thing in the morning, I'd say make sure you fueled really well the day and the night before. If you're waking up starving, that probably means you didn't eat enough for lunch, dinner the night before, right? But if you do have 30 minutes to an hour before you start that exercise and you wake up in the morning, some juice, maybe half a banana, something really carb heavy and not incredibly high in fiber and other nutrients is going to digest quicker and kind of give you that more immediate energy without digestive issues, right? Let's see. How do I feel about the Whole30 cleanse diet? Did it twice as a reset for my body. Should I supplement something dietary wise that I am missing out during my 30 days? I have to go back and look at everything that's in Whole30. But typically when you are doing a diet that cuts out a food group or multiple food groups, usually that means we might not be optimizing our nutrition as far as, what you need for just overall functioning and energy. So I don't know if there's a specific supplement I would recommend. I would just say make sure you have, a maintenance plan in place if this isn't a diet that you feel like you can sustain long term. Oof, that's hard. Yeah, talk with a dietitian to make sure you're getting everything you need. Everyone's needs are different. I wish I had a simpler answer for that. But yeah, if you're doing some kind of cleanse diet and you're restricting certain things, chat with your dietitian. They'll help you get a maintenance plan in place. Advice concerning exercise and intermittent fasting. Yeah, great question. Intermittent fasting, another super popular diet right now. I find intermittent fasting to be most useful long-term when people do it at night, right? So if they use a 12-hour period or so, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., whatever it is, doesn't have to be those numbers exactly. There is some research that says intermittent fasting can help with like diabetes prevention. It can be very healthy to include in your lifestyle. People who fast during the day hours where they're up and moving and functioning have a lot harder time sustaining that and getting the most out of their workouts. I will say that. Let's see. Are fiber supplements helpful for gut health like Benefiber? Yes, they can. They definitely can be helpful for gut health. Again, there's different kinds of fiber that we get from different foods. There's soluble, insoluble fiber. So it's good to get whole food sources as well. But a fiber supplement for a healthy individual, not taking any medications that might interact with that, can be a great way to, maybe boost your gut health and, kind of give you some fullness, some satiety if you're calorie cutting. I keep hearing that pain tolerance can be different depending on the person. Are there general guidelines for evaluating muscle soreness and whether or not we need another day of rest in between workouts? Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question, but I can tell you with my clients, if they're sore for 3 days or more, we're having a harder time getting them to, build muscle or lose weight, whatever it is, at the rate that they want, just because they're not functioning as well, right? If you're having pain when you're doing basic activities like walking or standing up from your chair, that's an indicator that you went a little bit too hard or you're not recovering quite as well as you want to be, right? So that's kind of the measure that I use. I'm not sure if there is an exact tool out there or not to measure that. All right. Looks like that is all of our questions, everybody. I threw my email up in the chat. Feel free to send me your supplement labels. Always curious what's on the market, what people are taking. And then good luck fueling for your workouts and recovering. I hope you got some good tips here to just optimize your workouts, your health, your energy. So thank you so much for joining.